Hey everyone, can you hear me okay? Give me a signal. Hello. Yay. Awesome. Okay. While we're waiting for a few more people to show up, I was thinking maybe if you don't mind, you can put in the chat where you're joining us from and if you're applying this cycle and if you've already taken the LSAT. Anyone? Okay, great. San Francisco. I'm in Half Moon Bay, San Francisco. Um, Texas, applying this fall, studying for the LSAT. East Bay area, studying for the LSAT, applying this cycle probably. Sounds good. Wow, lots of Bay Area people. I'm at Half Moon Bay. It's beautiful here today, but yesterday it was freezing cold and like wintertime. All right, well, we can just get started. Let me put this in the chat. Those of you joining a bit late. Okay, let's just get started and people can join us as they show up. So today we're going to talk about things you can start doing now. Even if you're studying for the LSAT, there are some tasks that you can take care of to kind of get them out of the way. And if you get everything out of the way early, then you can just focus on your essays and get everything done earlier than a lot of other people who will be scrambling and stressing out. So hopefully I can help you manage your time, manage the anxiety, and help you kind of line your ducks up in a row as early as possible. So my name is Indrani. Some of you have probably seen me before in these classes. I've been teaching a bunch of free classes lately. I am in the Bay Area. I'm actually in Half Moon Bay on the coast. And I worked at Stanford for a really long time, including as the former associate director of admissions at the law school, which is where I kind of gained my experience on the other side of the desk, reading thousands of applications, figuring out who should get in, who should get waitlisted, et cetera. So I have a lot of experience with the whole process from an admissions officer's perspective. And I like to share some of the knowledge that I've gained over the years. For the last several years, I've just been doing admissions coaching. So I have lots of experience helping people get into their law schools. So as we're going through this, you are welcome to shoot a chat message with questions. We're going to have a question and answer at the end, so we can get to your questions at the end. But if there's something kind of poignant that relates to what I'm talking to at the moment, I'll try and keep an eye on the chat. And if you wouldn't mind trying to keep your questions a little more general. A lot of times when I teach these classes, someone might have a very specific situation that only really pertains to them. And I'm happy to chat, offline during an intro call if you have a specific situation. But I'm going to try and make this session be as general as possible so it is relevant to everyone who is joining us. But feel free to throw messages in the message box if you have questions. If I'm talking about something that you need clarification or want a little more detail, I'm happy to answer. All right, so today we're going to go over 5 tasks that you can focus on now, even if you are studying for the LSAT. So one of them is the LSAT. Hopefully, if you haven't taken the LSAT or you don't have a score that you're happy with, you're still preparing for that. And we'll talk about timeline and how to study and things like that. And the next thing is setting up an LSAC account with the CAS, and you can upload your transcripts, or I guess order your transcripts, ask your people to write letters of rec. If you don't have the Credential Assembly Service set up, then you're kind of you'll have to wait till you do. And because transcripts take some time to get processed, it's a good idea to just get that started. Even if you're still in school, you'll be asked by, the admissions, if you're still in school and you're admitted to a law school, they'll tell you to submit a final transcript. So it's almost like a conditional admit. They want to see your final transcript. I mean, most people just, it's fine. But, in case someone drops out altogether and doesn't really graduate, then they have the option to say, hey, we can't really have you come here then. But it's fine to have a transcript that isn't complete at this point. We'll definitely talk about letters of rec. We'll talk about essays and school research to put together a school list. Okay. The first thing I want to talk about is the LSAT. It is, unfortunately, the LSAT and GPA are probably arguably the most important aspects of your application. So, they can balance each other out. So if your GPA isn't super strong and you have a very, very strong LSAT, that can kind of help kind of mitigate the GPA, and vice versa. Although for some reason, um, and I don't understand why, that LSAT really counts almost more than a 4-year GPA, which I don't get, because why should a test you study for now, not offset a 4-year, if you get all A's in college for 4 years, I don't understand why the LSAT isn't, as important as that. But together they are very, very important. We'll talk more about kind of how you can navigate putting together your school list with those numbers. And then the essay, of course, is super important too. It is a holistic approach. Even at Stanford, we read every single application that came in front to back, because we do understand that, there might be a gem in there in that pile of applications that we would miss if we just kind of threw them away with just looking at the LSAT or the GPA. So I'm sharing this slide with you. David Kilrin, if you don't know, is the CEO and founder of PowerScore, which is a highly regarded LSAT prep institution, and he keeps track of these numbers. So these are kind of real numbers of volume. Every year since COVID, the volume of applications has gone up and up. Um, and we kept waiting for things to kind of balance out and go down again, and it just never did. And now that the logic games are removed from the LSAT, it seems like the test scores have been going higher and higher. So I'm not trying to tell you this to freak you out, but it's just, it is what it is. And that LSAT is getting, I mean, almost 40% of people from last year got between 175 and 180. That's 40% more than the year before got between 175 and 180. So it's really important, that you get as high a score as you can. But the good news is, and the way I look at it is, if you want to be a lawyer, you will be a lawyer. If you don't get into Harvard, it's not the end of the world. I think it's really important to kind of keep expectations reasonable. And there's so many law schools in this country. You can definitely have a great career, and not end up at Harvard. If you go somewhere else, you'll be fine. So it's good to kind of keep your expectations level. Although, I don't discourage people from applying to Stanford, Harvard, and Yale, even regardless of what their LSAT and GPA is. If that's your dream, you should definitely go for it. But I think, and we'll talk about more about how to put together a school list, but putting together a school list that is optimized so that you'll have as many options as possible at the end is a super important part of this process. Okay. So hopefully most of you, if you're applying this fall, have already started taking LSAT test, practice tests, and you're being tutored, or you're reading your book, and you're trying to spend some time every day studying. One thing that I think is important to note is studying more doesn't always mean studying better. So if you're have a full-time job or you're in school and then you say you're going to still study 5 or 6 hours a day, the last 2 hours of that studying may not be uh, productive. I mean, you might be staring at the book or practicing, and it's kind of going in one eyeball and out the other because you're just burnt out and you're really tired or hungry or you haven't had any exercise. I think it's super important to try and balance your life when when you are studying for the LSAT. And 2 hours of very focused studying can be more productive than 6 hours of studying where you're just exhausted. So keep that in mind. If you haven't already taken a diagnostic, I would recommend you do one of those as soon as you can, just so that you can see where you are right now. And then you'll know how it feels and which sections were hard and where you need practice. And then, double down. And depending on what how best you learn, you might just be self-study, in books, or can do free online classes at Khan Academy, for example. There's also places like PowerScore that they kind of have a hybrid solution where you might have a private tutor, group classes, self-paced tutorials, that kind of thing. All is kind of mix and match. Seven Sage is another option. So there's a lot of options, and also Leland has LSAT coaches for a wide variety of budgets. So definitely, if you need a little bit of extra help and you're having a hard time motivating, if you're doing it by yourself, I would consider doing one of these things. So if you haven't taken the test yet and you're planning to take it, June is a really good first test. But if you haven't started studying, maybe shoot for August or September. If you don't like the score that you get, then you can take it again in October. November is getting a little bit late. It is a rolling process, and so if you haven't taken the LSAT or you want a better score, November might work. You get the scores like towards the end of November, but optimally you're applying to law school between, October and mid-November. Okay, the LSAC account. Were there any questions about anything I said there? No? Okay. So the LSAC account, it's kind of funny because they've been around for so long, and one would think that they have really optimized their user interface. But I do have people every year that are like, I don't understand how to do this or that. So and people who are not applying to law school right now don't get to go into LSAC and play around. So I haven't actually, they used to let us have dummy accounts. So I used to be able to play around and really get familiar with the user interface and all the different logistics, but that's not allowed anymore. So I actually haven't been in the system for quite some time. Sometimes I'll have a client share their screen and we'll kind of try and figure it out together, but it does seem like there is some kind of quirky, weird clunkiness that sometimes can get a little confusing. So, and it can get stressful, especially if you're getting towards the time when you want to apply and you're not really sure what you're doing and you're not familiar with the user interface. That can add stress to your the whole situation. So I would try and just kind of dig around. You don't have to worry about breaking anything. You don't have to worry that a school will get notified that you've opened an application. You can actually open applications and look around and see what some of the applications might be closed, but there are some schools that have later deadlines like in the summer. And so feel free to open up an application and see how it works and just get the feel for it. So well, I always read almost all, but I don't know of a single law school that doesn't use LSAC for applications. So it's kind of, you know, they have you on a short chain, basically. So you should get to know it. And the Credential Assembly Service is an extra service, but it's required. So although it's kind of marketed as this thing that you can do, it's pretty much required. So you can sign up for the Credential Assembly Service now. Um, Basically, what that is it's their service where they bundle all of your materials and ship it off, so to speak, to your law schools for you. So you fill out the information for your application, and then they're going to bundle up your letters of rec, a copy of your resume, your official transcripts. They also do the academic summary report, which is taking your transcripts, especially for those of you who have maybe transferred in from another school or a JC. They take all your official transcripts and they kind of like do something behind the scenes and spit out an LSAC GPA. You get an LSAC GPA that you don't agree with. I mean, this has happened. You can refute it. So I've had a client who was like, what is going on? My real GPA is 3.8 and LSEC says it's 3.2, like some big discrepancy. She actually called them up and it was a mistake. So they do make mistakes. So don't just take it for what it is. If you want to question what they are telling you when you get that report, I would definitely do so. So the academic summary report also, some people have questions about whether going to, if you're not in undergrad or you don't have an undergrad degree from, Stanford, you went to San Jose State, let's say, does that give you some sort of disadvantage? And the answer is no. There's a lot of reasons people go to different schools. And so admissions committees aren't going to ding you for where you went to college, but the academic summary report actually will look at all the people from your school that have applied to law school and do kind of a comparison. So there's these kind of data bands where it's like, okay, you went to San Jose State, and all the people that went to San Jose State that applied to law school, you're kind of in this range. For most people, they do it by GPA, so it's like people who have a 3.8, this percentage gets that GPA. It's a little bit complicated, but so it kind of levels the playing field. So you're being compared to other students at your school, not other students at like Ivy League schools, if you don't go to an Ivy League school. The other thing to think about is if you have accommodations in school, or you did in college, or you have a later diagnosis of ADHD, for example, or anxiety, you can get accommodations from LSAC, and the schools won't know that you got extra time. There's all sorts of different accommodations, from extra time to more breaks to getting up and stretching, whatever, basically what you need to get through the test. There is a little bit of processing that has to happen. You have to fill out some forms, get a doctor's note. I think it takes 2 or 3 weeks for LSAC to review all of that and get back to you with the, if you've approved for accommodations or not. But that's another thing that you can get out of the way now, so that you don't have to scramble and rush right before you take the test. Any questions? Quiet group. Okay. Letters of rec. These are also, it is a holistic approach. So letters of rec is it's something that kind of it's a third party telling the admissions committee what kind of person you are. The best letters of recommendation are from academic sources. So if you have been out of school just for 1 or 2 years, hopefully you have a teacher or professor that can write you a letter of rec. And it's really, the best ones are the ones who know you the best. It's more important to ask someone who's really gotten to know you well, inside and outside the classroom if you can, who can write more than, just what grade you got, and that you participated well, or you were always on time to class, which isn't as kind of meaty as things like you're a critical thinker, you ask really great questions, you are ambitious, you go above and beyond, you're helpful, all kinds of attributes that you might have shown in the class. So if you think about it, the AdComs are looking for potential law students. So one predictor of success is what kind of student you were when you were in college. So that's why it's important to try and get an academic letter. And by the way, some schools require one academic letter. So start thinking about who you want to write your letters. Most schools require 2. Some say you can have up to 4. Now, if you ask several people, and I always recommend you ask more people than you need, because it does happen that someone might say no for whatever reason, or you might not be able, might not be able to find them. It's hard to get in touch with them. Um, so let's say you ask 4 people to write letters, and then you only need 2. They won't know that you're not using their letter. Um, Once they upload their letter, it's, they won't hear anything. So don't worry about that if you ask someone and you don't end up using their letter. But the other thing you can think about is, if you are waitlisted down the road next spring and winter, and I guarantee every one of you will be waitlisted somewhere. A lot of times the schools will say, you can submit a new letter of rec. So it's kind of nice to have a letter of rec hanging in the wings that you can submit without having to scramble and find one. Oh, someone's asking, what value do you see in submitting professional recommenders, i.e. if I were to submit 2 academic and 1 professional? I think if you've been out of school for some time and you want to show a different aspect of yourself, I think that's perfectly reasonable to have 2 academic and 1 professional. That's actually quite common. And again, so like if we're talking about professional recommendations, you should have someone write you a letter that is, I'd much rather see your supervisor or someone you worked on a project with than the CEO of the company. If the CEO doesn't really know you, if you're like in the elevator every morning with the CEO, that's great. But what is the CEO going to say if he doesn't really know you well? It's much more important to get someone who you really know than their title. The title does not matter. That said, too, it doesn't matter. You don't have to have letters of rec from a legal adjacent topic in school if you're doing an academic one. It can be anything. It could be a math professor. The most important thing is that they really can describe your attributes more than just you got a good grade. What do you recommend we provide to recommenders like professors that would be helpful to them? Perfect question. Sorry, I can't read. What do you recommend we provide to recommenders like professors that would be helpful for them when writing the letter? This is an excellent question, and the easier you make it for them, the more likely they are to get it out of the way early. I know, if you just ask them and don't give them any guidance, they might just put it aside for a while and say, "Oh, I have to really think about this before I write," and they might procrastinate. So I recommend you have an updated resume. One thing that might happen is they will say, "Sure, I'll write you a letter of rec, but I want your personal statement." Now, especially if you ask them this early, the likelihood of your personal statement being done is probably pretty slim. I would actually be shocked if it was done. So people think they need your personal statement to write a letter of rec, but they don't. It is much more helpful to actually maybe write a paragraph of why, a little bit about your background, why you want. So it could be almost like a casual personal statement, but it doesn't have to be the polished thing you're going to be submitting. Just kind of the your background, why you want to go to law school, what your inspiration is, who you want to help after you become a lawyer, maybe a little bit of your goals. And then you might also remind them of a project you did, or you could give them a paper that you did really well on, something like that to kind of jog their memory. So that's usually what I recommend that you put together. You don't have to send that stuff up front. So the way you can do it is, you know, you ask someone maybe via email or stop by their office. They say sure, then you send an email thanking them, and then say, I'm going to follow up shortly with some material that will help you write the letter. Um, and then once you enter their information into the LSAC system for letters of rec, LSAC is going to send that person an email that says, Joe Schmo has requested a letter of recommendation from you. Here's what you need to do. So they'll get instructions from LSAC. Would it hurt to use a letter from a professor from sophomore year versus one from junior or senior year? I don't think it would hurt. I mean, as long as they know you and you can remind them of stuff, as long as it's a detailed letter, it won't hurt, because at the time when you were being taught, you were in their class, and so they'll talk about something in the past. But if you have a teacher that you've taken more than one class with, they probably know you better. So, but if that was your very favorite professor and you did awesome, then go for it. One of the things that a lot of my clients say and ask is like, "Oh my gosh, I've been out of school for 3 years. I'm so embarrassed. I haven't really kept up with my professors. They might not remember me." The thing is, they might remember you. And if you had a very favorite professor, you might have been their favorite student for all you know. So it doesn't hurt to ask, right? If you ask and they say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I don't really remember you well enough," or "I don't have the bandwidth," or whatever, oh well, at least you asked. I mean, I've had people out of school for 10 years that have asked a professor and they remembered them. So I say just ask, and then if you have a hard time getting someone to say yes, then you can move on to professional recs. The adcoms understand that people who've been out of school for some time might have a hard time getting an academic letter of rec. The schools that require one, if you've been out of school for 5 years or so, if you cannot, you've honestly tried and you cannot get a letter of rec from someone that taught you 5 or 6 years ago, you can write an addendum in your application explaining that you could not get a letter of rec from an academic source, and it's understandable. Okay, we good? Any questions about letters of rec? Alaya, do you have, sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. Are we good? Yes, or are we good? Or yes, you have a question. Oh, how do you feel about professors that tell you to draft it yourself? I decided I'm not going to use that professor and find another one. I think that's the best thing. Thanks for asking that question. It happens all the time. I think it's really weird. How can you write a letter of recommendation for yourself? It's not going to sound like a professor. I remember reading these letters and going, I bet that kid wrote the letter himself, and that can kind of hurt you down the road. Also, if you have a coach, like when I have a client that says, "Will you help me write my letter of recommendation?" I don't touch that with a 10-foot pole. I don't even want to know. I'm like, blah, blah, blah. Don't tell me that they asked you to, you decide what you want to do. But I recommend that you don't do it. So, what I would do is push back gently and say, I understand, you're super busy and it might be easiest if I write it for you, but I don't really feel comfortable doing that. Here's some information that will help you write it. And then you can give your resume and like your plan for law school and what you want to do beyond. You could even be so brave as to like, if they want you to write it yourself, then feel free to give them attributes that you want them to highlight. So, that you're a critical thinker, that maybe you can tell them, you were a tutor and you have empathy, and whatever it is that are your like your strengths, you can feed that to them, and then they can put those in their own words. But I wouldn't write a letter yourself. If a school accepts more than two, should we go ahead and provide them more than two, even if we already have two academic letters and any additional ones are professional? You don't have to do more. We're going to talk a little bit about like optional stuff. And two academic letters is great. If you have a professional letter that you think will add a lot of value to your application, go for it. But if you're kind of like, who else should I ask? Don't worry about it. Most people have, if two is required, they just do two. Okay, cool. Let's move on. Essays. So, as I said, I don't expect you to start writing your essays at this moment. Timeline, I recommend that people submit between September and mid-November. September is very early. We'll talk a little bit about why it makes sense to apply early, um, but if you can't pull it together by September 15th, don't sweat it. Give yourself another month. October 15th is perfectly fine. I wouldn't go for it. If you wait until the actual deadline, you will have less options guaranteed than if you apply before that. But mid-November, I mean, when I worked at Stanford, we really didn't start making lots of decisions till, to be honest, the winter break. is when we started making most of our decisions. If people apply early, so if you think about it, it's a comparative process. And so if two people apply on the first day that the application opens, even if one has, outstanding GPA and LSAT and everything looks great, we still want to compare them to other people. So we really need a critical mass to really like figure out who's applying, what the pool looks like, and we are also picking, we're trying to, put together a diverse class of diverse people. And the people who apply early on, they might be kind of similar in some ways, right? So we want to mix and match. We want a little of this and a little of that. And so once you have that critical mass, you can start kind of like making decisions. So um, if you find yourself hitting September 15th and applications are opening and you're starting to feel the pressure, try and take a breath and just know that you will still have options if you give yourself another month. Okay. Oh, sorry, I missed a question. What are rec letters typically written about? Is the recommender writing why they think we are a good fit for their ambitions to go to law school? That is part of it if they feel comfortable, but most of all, it's just like what kind of student you were in their class, how you contributed, and what kind of human being you are, and you were a joy to teach, and you love to learn, and you're smart, and just these kinds of attributes if they feel comfortable. So some people ask professors to write letters who have a law degree, and who have been to law school or maybe even have taught law or law adjacent classes, and they might have more of the context of what a law student needs to be like. And if they have that context, then they can add something like that, but it's not necessary. Okay. So the other thing that you can start doing now, is checking out the essay prompts. Some applications are already closed, and they're going to reopen in the fall, but you can check their websites, look in LSAC if they're still opened, and you can see. And I actually kind of track the prompts, so my clients can, even if the applications are closed, I have access to see what the prompts were last year. Not every school, obviously, but if I have a client who applied to school last year, I have, their list of schools and I can see the essay prompts. So it's just nice to kind of see what you will be writing about and kind of frame your brain to think forward, and like, just take little memo notes. You could do it in your phone or jot down or your journal or whatever. But if something cool happens at work or at school, or you remember something that happened that you think would be a great story to tell, jot it down so that you have some options later on. Um, the different prompts are interesting. And one of the exercises I do with my clients is analyzing the prompts and trying to figure out what they're actually asking for. Because even though most schools call it a personal statement or a statement of purpose, the actual wording is different. Um, as I say here, that there's two flavors that I like to see my people write. I actually have my clients write two essays that are 2 pages double spaced. Now that's super short, but most schools say that is the maximum length. So it makes sense to try and just keep within that. If there's a school that allows for 3 pages, then you can, and they ask for why you want to go to their school. Not every school asks, but like UCLA says, tell us why you think you'll make a good contribution to the law field and why you want to go to UCLA. So they're actually asking why you like UCLA. And let's say they allow for 3 pages. If you have a 2-page essay, you can add a paragraph at the end that talks about why you like UCLA, and you're still within their page limits. So but as I said, every prompt is totally different. Some are like Georgetown, I believe, and University of Chicago. They basically say write whatever the heck you want, and that's it. It just says tell us something new and different. And then other schools are very prescribed, where like UCLA, where it says what's your inspiration to obtain a law degree, what do you want to do with a law degree, who do you want to help with a law degree, and why do you want to go to UCLA. So these are two very different kinds of prompts. If you write an essay for the wide open prompt, which is I call the personal statement. It can also be a diversity statement. And then you also write what I call the professional statement, which is more of the this is my background and this is my professional aspirations. Most schools, with all of their different prompts, like optional, required, supplemental, what you will find a way to plug both of those essays into your application, which is awesome because then they'll get the whole picture of you. And I think that puts you at an advantage over someone who just has one essay. Any questions about essays? We'll have question and answer later, so if you think of something um, later, definitely ask. Oh, do you recommend we write all the optional essays? Now, I actually don't. Some schools, I mean, if there's one optional essay, then yes. I think the balance is you don't want to be seen as lazy, but you also don't want to force yourself to write essays that feel disingenuous or forced. So I know Georgetown has a bunch of optional essays to choose from, and there's a few that are kind of fun. Like there's one like give us a top 10 list. Um, and some schools have optional essays like tell us about a time you disagreed with someone. How did the conversation go? And what would you do differently next time? So something like that as an optional essay, I stand by the fact that I my opinion is you don't force yourself to write one about like a conversation you had if you can't think of something super inspiring. I think it can actually hurt you more to write a blah or forced essay than to leave it blank. So if you have 5 essays to choose from, pick 1 or 2. If there's 5 to choose from and one of them is why do you want to go to our school? That's the one optional essay I don't consider optional. They're giving you the chance to kind of blow some sunshine up their butt. So I would do that. I would actually definitely write an essay saying why you love that school, even if it's optional. The other ones, unless again, you might read a prompt and be like, oh, I have a perfect example of this, or I have this really cool story to tell, go for it. But if you're like, I don't even know what to write, then I would not do it. Um, one of the exercises I really like doing with my clients, as I said, is kind of going through these, talking them through, talking about all the different prompts, picking which ones to write, which ones to leave alone, and where the professional essay can fit and where the personal or diversity essay can fit. Okay. Any questions? School research. Now, there's a lot. I mean, there are people that I talk to that they're like, I'm just gonna look at the US News and World Report and apply to all the top 10 schools and hope I get into one of them. And you know what? I mean, that's fine. If that person has, 175 LSAT and a 4.0 GPA, I'm not gonna argue with that. However, for my people that have like a 165 LSAT and a 3.6 GPA, if they're saying they're only going to apply to the top 10, I'm going to push back. This is a really grueling and sometimes stressful and overwhelming process. And at the end, if you don't get in anywhere, it's pretty soul crushing. So I think it's really important to manage your expectations. Definitely apply to some dream schools. I mean, I helped a guy last year with a 2.6 GPA that got into UVA. I was shocked. I was ecstatic, but I was so happy for him. Um, but if you you know, want to be a lawyer, you will be a lawyer. If you want to be a lawyer, you don't have to go to a top 10 school. I think the top 14, which is like a weird number, it's arbitrary. They're the ones where if you go to a top 14 school, then yes, your options when you graduate will be probably wider. You could probably move to any state you want. You can end up in Big Law in New York. Um, but if Big Law isn't what you want, then definitely diversify your list, especially if you don't have those perfect numbers or super high numbers. I would diversify the list. So one thing you can start doing now is thinking about that list. So regional schools is something you can think about. If you know that you want to go back to your hometown, for example, when you graduate, pick a school that is maybe in the top 30 or even below, that is well reputed in that town or nearby. You'll be at a school where that state bar will be, you'll be prepping for that state bar. And local schools are, they're people are heavily recruited from local organizations. So if there's a very successful law firm in that town and you go to the local law school and you do really well, you'll probably get a great job at that law firm. So that's one way to diversify your list. For example, I'm in the Bay Area, so there's Berkeley and Stanford, obviously. But if I have a client who doesn't have the LSAT or GPA for Berkeley or Stanford, I talk to them about Santa Clara, especially if they want to go into high tech law or IP or something like that. Because like I have a bunch of people that are interested in AI and like policy around AI. And Santa Clara is not as competitive to get into, but they're award-winning programs in high-tech law that are very specific and excellent, and the career data is amazing. So throw Santa Clara on your list. If you have, above a 160 or even a 160 LSAT and a, 3.6 GPA, you'll probably get into Santa Clara, and that would be a great kind of backup plan for you. So just try and keep your kind of your mind open and your heart open, and put together that school list, really curate it, and you'll have some great options at the end. So pick one or two or three even dream schools. The bulk of your schools should be where your LSAT and GPA is aligned with their median scores, and then pick a few that you're above the 25 percentile. One way you can find all this data, in case you're not sure, I'm going to type it into the chat. ABA 509. Does everyone know what those are? Awesome. Okay, cool. So just in case some people don't know, those are every year the ABA requires that accredited law schools disclose certain data about their incoming class from the prior year. So if you search any law school that's accredited by the ABA and you say Stanford ABA 509, you will get a nice little PDF. It's like 2 pages with all of this data, including the LSAT scores and GPA, how many, what percentage are admitted, what percentage get financial aid. It has all sorts of great data that you can look at when you're putting together your list, and that those LSAT medians or 25, 50, and 75% percentiles are there. And so that when you're putting together your school list, you can kind of align with those. And if you're above the 50 percentile, you can put those as a match. If you're above the 25 percentile, you could put those as a likely. I like to say likely better than safety, because safety kind of, I don't know, things are so subjective. I like likely better than safety. And then if you're above the 75th, then that's then you can apply to those schools and like pretty much be like, I'm a shoo-in if you're above the 75th. So talking to people is another great way to put together your school list. Let's say you curate a school list of 20 schools, but you don't want to apply to all 20. If you join the LinkedIn group for your undergraduate alums, you can search those people. And like, if there's a school, you're like, oh, this school sounds great, but you don't really know much about it, message someone on LinkedIn that went there. You can figure out where they went, what they're doing with their life, what their career, what their job is now. Find people that have a cool job that went to a school you're not familiar with, or talk to people about a school you want to learn more about. And the first thing you can say is, I am also an alum from UCLA or whatever school. I'm applying to law school this fall, and I see you went to XYZ law school, and I'm wondering if you would mind answering a few questions. So then you can ask questions like, what was the culture like? If you could go back in time, would you go to that school again? How hard was it to get the job that you have? And someone might go, oh, I got a great education, but it felt so competitive and cutthroat. It was so stressful the whole time. That might be something that you are not interested in. Other people thrive with that, and other people might want more of a collegial, friendly, like everyone's supportive, everyone's friendly kind of atmosphere. So think about your values and what you're looking for in a law school, and then ask real people. The thing about the admissions websites is every single website that you look at is going to say they're the best thing since sliced bread. So you're not, you could get kind of information about clinics and externships, and maybe if you're interested in abroad programs and that kind of thing, you can find all that stuff on the website. But I think talking to people, you'll get the real deal. All right. That was my presentation. So I'm going to stick around for some Q&A. You can ask me anything about anything, and I will be happy to do my best to answer them. And you can unmute yourself and talk, or just chat in the window. I'm sure people have questions.
I have a quick question about the rolling admission.
Mhm.
I know you said that it opens in September, but what is it you were saying about like November being like a disadvantage in terms of, I guess, submitting the application or taking the LSAT? Like, is there a difference in, I guess, not acceptance rate, but like, what's the main difference in applying like early in September versus later on when the
So if
application
you apply
closes?
early in September, so rolling admissions means as the applications come in, they start reading them. They're not waiting until March 15th deadline to start the process. So there
Right.
are seats that will be taken up as you go along. If you apply, so some people feel very strongly that if they apply September 15th, they have the best chance they can. And I guess in some ways it's true, because none of the seats have been filled yet. So if you were to wait until March 15th to apply, a lot of those seats might be taken. So that's what that means. What I was trying to say about taking a November LSAT score, if you get your score the third week in November, it's just later than optimal. It's not the end of the world, though. I mean, I've helped people get into law school that apply in February, and they still get into law school. But it's just harder. There's just less slots left. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Okay.
Hello, I have a
Hi.
question.
Uh-huh.
I between getting my undergrad and applying for law school right now, I actually went and got a paralegal certificate. It was during COVID, so I was basically it was a in between interterm, and I want to
Mhm.
know if you think that might be useful on an application to mention.
Well, yeah, you should mention everything and anything that adds a little bit extra. So, I
Okay.
mean, it would be silly if you didn't mention it. Will it help you get into
Yeah, that
school?
was
I
more my
think,
question.
yeah, I mean, I think if you have a paralegal certificate, and are you working as a paralegal right now?
No, because I'm studying for the LSAT.
Okay. So, I mean, you put it on your resume. I was going to say, if
Okay.
you're working as a paralegal, then you might have some good content for your essay. But if you're not working as a paralegal yet, then just put it. You can put a section of certificates and whatever extracurriculars it would be. So yeah, I mean, the thing
Okay.
I think so there's a people have master's degrees already. People ask me, well, will that offset my undergraduate GPA? The answer is no. Um, it's just like something extra. So I think it gives you more experience. It gives you something to write about in your essays, but it's impossible for me to quantify like, oh yeah, a master's degree will definitely help you get in or not. It's very subjective, but yes, definitely if any of you have certificates, awards, other things that you could put on your resume, definitely put them in there for sure. Okay, Daniela. Aside from getting a high LSAT, how can we offset a GPA that is below a school's median? I think letters of rec. So if you have academic letters of rec that talk about what a fantastic student you are, that can definitely help. Um, and then, you just have to do really well on those essays. I do strongly believe that the essays can make or break the whole process. As I said, I had this guy who had a 2.6 undergraduate GPA, and he got into a handful of top 10, top 14 schools. And he had a decent LSAT, but it wasn't like the best LSAT. So I do think that, and he had actually applied the year before and gotten into nowhere. So I think that the essays are definitely something that can help. And I recommend that you do work with someone on your essays. I have capacity. I'm happy to help you. I have essay packages and I have comprehensive package, which basically we would start right now and be together for a whole year when you're trying to figure out where you want to go. So it's like a whole year. We don't track the hours. It's just like all inclusive package, and I will be your partner. And then other people just want help with the essays, and I'm happy to do that as well. So, but I do recommend that if you can to, get some help with your essays. I obviously don't write the essays for you, but I help with like what the optimal content should be that will demonstrate your attributes that will be helpful in law school. Was that helpful? Oops, I'm clicking the wrong screen. I'm just putting this up here. It really helps me out if you guys liked this class, if you would take 1 minute to give me a thumbs up for 5 stars, I would really appreciate it. It really helps me out. So once you leave this class, you can once you leave the class, once you exit, you'll get a thumbs up, thumbs down, and if you give a thumbs up, then they ask you to leave a star rating, and you can, if you want, write something. If you write something nice, that helps me out a lot, but a 5 star is great too. So should we talk should we talk about the type of law we want to practice in the app? Yes, this is a great question. I actually do a whole I'm doing a whole class on essays. I can't remember what date. Is it, if you go to my profile, which the QR code, all my free classes are listed there. I can't remember what date off the top of my head, which is kind of dumb. I'm sorry. But the 15th. I will, how about this? When we're done with this class, I'm going to send an email to everyone and I will list all the other classes that I have coming up and you can decide if you want to come. But okay. Oh, thank you, Daniela. By the way, I'm actually teaching it again on May 29th, which I just submitted to do. So I think they're looking at they're going to approve that soon. And so May 29th is going to be an addition. Okay. So should we talk about the type of law? So yes, I strongly believe that even if you're not sure, you should sound sure. No one's going to look at your essay again once you submit it. And if you change your mind, it's perfectly fine. But if you think about it, if there's a person who writes in their essay, here's a common kind of like theme. I don't, everyone's always told me I would be a really good lawyer because I'm a critical thinker and I'm a great writer. I'm not really sure what kind of law I want to do. However, I'll figure it out in law school. And there's someone else who says, I have a background in this thing and I was working and I met this person and this, I was so inspired to help this group of people, and that's why I want to go to law school because I'm going to make an impact on policy or something like that. I know that's very vague, but that is much more compelling than someone who says they're going to figure it out in law school. So that's the other thing that I help people figure out is what is that topic that they're going to say they're going to study based upon what they've already done. So it could be based on a class you took. It could be, sometimes literally it's like a magazine article that someone read. It just like lit a fire in them and they want to go do something about it. And people sometimes pivot, right? So maybe their whole background is in one thing and then they had this experience and they decide to do something else. That's totally fine too. You just have to make sure that your narrative makes sense and that it's kind of concise, and it's just like kind of all the pieces fit together with your background for what you want to study. So you have to have kind of evidence that you have that inspiration. So it's very important to be, and you only have 2 pages, right? So you have to be pretty concise and straight, cut to the chase. Okay, we have 5 more minutes-ish for a few more questions. Let's see. Do you think it's hurtful or maybe not convincing to talk about wanting to pursue a certain area of law in which we don't have a lot of experience in? No, I think it's fine. I've actually, as long as you feel so, it's not convincing if you're not being genuine. But if you have a genuine interest in something that you don't have any experience in, that's totally fine. You want to talk about what your inspiration is. I had a woman a couple years ago. She did her whole career in PR, and she was super successful. But she has a kid who is allergic to like almost every food known to man, and so she decided she wanted to go to law school because she felt like allergies should be considered something that the Americans with Disabilities Act looks at, and that, you know, restaurants should be required to disclose common allergens or um, have like some sort of system where people can look up whether it's safe to eat there based on their allergies. And so she's dropped her whole career about being in PR, and she got into Columbia. So I think it all has to do with like how convincing you sound, and not don't worry about like you don't have the experience. If you are very inspired to do something, then you can write a convincing story about that. I think that's perfectly fine, and it works. So here's a little discount code. I will put it in my follow-up email as well. So if you guys want to sign up for any package, I'll give you 10% off if you sign up by the end of this week. Anything else? We have a couple more minutes. Did you find this helpful, everyone?
Hey, Indrani, I actually have a question.
Yeah.
For you.
Who's
So
this?
you meant this is Ahira.
Hi.
So you mentioned a little bit about testing combinations, right? So once you submit that, is that just for that test that's coming up, or does it last for a little bit?
No, it lasts for the test that you're doing. You're just you get accommodations, and then you'll have those accommodations. You're basically proving to them that it's like a medical necessity. And so, yeah, so once you do it once, you can take the test twice and you'll get the same accommodations.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else? We have 1 more minute. Nothing? Okay, well, I hope you found that helpful, and I'd love to see you in some of my other classes. I teach classes. I've been doing them about once a week lately. So yeah, hopefully I'll see you again. And I will send a follow-up email tonight with the discount code and my schedule of classes. I'm also going to be participating in law school boot camp, which is taking place in June. How can we access the recording? Once the recording is available, the Leland team, not me, will send an email to everyone who is registered to get the recording. It usually takes a week or something. If you don't get the recording, then ping me. You can message me. If you go to if you click that QR code, you'll go to my profile. You can message me, and I can remind them to send that out. All right, everyone. If you have time, give me a review. It would be very, very helpful. And I hope to work with some of you this cycle. I have capacity, so hit me up. Okay, bye.